Good morning, everyone. Happy PGP. My name is Mike Gorka. I'm the founder of Project Glitch. Project Glitch is a small team of journalists focused on the future of the internet with an emphasis on new forms of privacy and identity. And we publish a newsletter, projectglitch.xyz, and we program event content like this. We'll be here next month as well. We are going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about digital identity. It's an extremely complicated topic, and we can only promise to scratch the surface here this morning. We'll be zooming in on the debate, which has been heating up lately, over mobile driver's license technology. We'll also zoom out and consider a big picture, and we'll look forward to a future that's filled with AI. And one big question that we'll wrestle with is, what role can crypto play in all this? So without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed panelists. I think we only see one. Is Manu on the screen too? Joining me here on stage is Stanley. He's a senior policy analyst at the ACLU. And on screen, we will have Kim Hamilton Duffy, the executive director of the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and Manu Sporny, who we're working on getting him on screen. And he's the CEO of Digital Bazaar and the co-founder of the Web Payments, Verifiable Credentials, and Decentralized Identifier working groups at the World Wide Web Consortium. To start off, I'm going to have the panelists fill us in a little bit on their backgrounds.
He's working on it.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so one of the reasons I'm looking forward to this conversation is because each of the three of you are so concerned about this topic, but each from a different perspective. So I'm going to go around the horn, starting here with Jay, and then to Kim and to Manu. If you could each please quickly fill us in on your background and how and why you became so concerned with digital identity. Kick us off, Jay.
Okay, thanks. I work for the ACLU in Emerging Technologies. I've been working for the ACLU for a long time. I started 5 weeks before 9/11. I work on privacy issues are a big part of what I do. I'm paid to be paranoid. And, the ACLU has always been wary of having a national identity system, a unique identifier that tracks all of us. And so we fought the Real ID Act. And I monitored digital identity and engaged in it fairly heavily when the Obama administration ran a program called NSTIC, National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, which was sort of a multi-stakeholder process intended to create a new, basically ID layer for the internet. That kind of failed, and I was just like, this is all wheel spinning. I'm going to ignore this digital identity world, which is this huge, complicated world full of a lot of brilliant people who are working on a lot of brilliant ideas for having decentralized and privacy protective identity, but it just didn't seem to be going anywhere. And then it started to be going somewhere again, in the form of mobile driver's licenses, or MDLs as they're called. And so this international standards body, ISO, created a standard for a digital driver's license. This standard was created in secret by a secret committee that included the DHS, Apple, Google, the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, and we don't know who else. China, Russia, who knows? And I asked them who was on the committee that created the standard, and they refused to tell me. Sorry, that's secret. And this standard is being adopted at a rapid clip by states around the country, often by often allies of ours who care about privacy, just sort of naively. Oh, you have your credit card in your Apple Wallet. We can make it so you can have your driver's license in your wallet too. But the implications of having a digital driver's license that don't protect privacy are very significant because, and the real game here is to create one that can be used online. And when everybody who follows technology knows when you make things easy to do, they tend to be overdone. And we see this with surveillance, for example. And so the concern is that there's going to be a lot of incentive for every website to track you and say, hey, you want to watch a YouTube video? You want to log into your social media? Do you want to browse here at catbeds.com? Click here to send us your digital driver's license. They're going to want to do it for marketing. They're going to want to do it for forensic, so they can track you if you turn out to hack the site. They're going to want to make sure you haven't been kicked off the site before. That make sure you're over 13 so they can market to you, and so on and so forth. And so this is really has the potential to become a super cookie that follows you not only offline, doctors' offices, office lobbies, whoever else in the world that asks you for your ID, which is a growing list, but also online. And this ISO standard is highly inadequate. It has some good privacy protections, but for example, it allows it allows the ID to have a phone home mechanism where you present your ID to a liquor store clerk. The liquor store clerk pings the servers of the DMV and pulls down your information. Now the DMV has a bird's eye view of everybody that you show your ID to. So this alarmed us greatly. Put out a report in 2021 on this, and recently put out a paper with legislative recommendations for what we think states, if you're going to have a digital ID in your state, the state legislature should insist that it have these qualities. And the overarching point is that we have all this cryptographic techniques to preserve privacy, as in the cryptocurrency space. We should use them.
So Jay jumped the gun a little bit. I was going to have you set up the problem after, and then the next question. But let's keep going around the horn, because basically what I want to accomplish here with this first round is so that everyone can get a sense of who we're dealing with in this panel, because each of the panelists is bringing a wealth of experience and a slightly different perspective to this. Jay was at our privacy summit in October, raising the alarm about these mobile driver's license and digital identity, and that's kind of what led to this panel discussion. And he introduced me to Manu Sporny, and we'll move on to Manu. Manu, can you fill us in on sort of what you've been working on over the past decade, how you came to this space, and what makes you so concerned about digital identity at this moment?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name's Manu Sporny. I'm one of the founders of a company called Digital Bazaar, which is based in the United States in Virginia, the state of Virginia. And like many of you, I grew up with the web and the internet. I think it's a foundational part of an individual's ability to kind of communicate and engage with the rest of humanity, not just in the US, but globally. And one of the things that the web and the internet wasn't designed with was a way of strongly identifying yourself, or privately only revealing a part of yourself to log into a website and things of that nature. So I care deeply about the web. I care deeply about privacy and privacy enhancing technologies. We also, our company, works with the U.S. federal government and state governments. So we work with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. We work with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. We work with the U.S. DHS Privacy Office. We work with the state of California deploying digital credentials. So not just mobile driver's licenses, which Jay rightly points out have a number of deeply concerning privacy issues, but we work on alternative digital credential technologies like verifiable credentials. Specifically, we're focused on using some of this advanced cryptography that's been used in the cryptocurrency sector and applying it to digital identity online. It's very important that people are able to keep many parts of their identity private when they're engaging in transactions that don't need a full-blown driver's license to do that engagement. So we have some boots on the ground experiences on what deploying this stuff at the federal and state government look like. I'm also very involved in setting global standards. Not at ISO, but at organizations like the World Wide Web Consortium, who have a radically transparent way of developing these standards, meaning it's done out in the public. You can see every single line written in the specification. You know who's doing it. It has a very intensive privacy and security review. And so I'm looking forward to chatting with everyone here about how these technologies can be developed correctly in a way that they can be respectful of people's privacy.
Thank you. And Kim, you come to this topic from your own perspective, Executive Director of the Decentralized Identity Foundation. Can you fill us in on how long you've been paying attention to this stuff and what makes you especially concerned at the moment?
Yes. Hi, I'm Kim Duffy, Executive Director of the Decentralized Identity Foundation. And I've been focused on the problem of giving people control over their digital identities and data for about 8 years when I started working on it from a lifelong learning kind of perspective. The idea that we are often beholden to institutions to prove our background, our learning experiences. And then the many identity problems to continue if we are self-custodying our data to continue to prove control over, our records and who we are. So kind of went on a rabbit hole from there. And then also the privacy considerations that come up from there. So Decentralized Identity Foundation, what do we do? What is decentralized identity in the first place? So we focus on providing people control over their digital identities and data. And in addition to the privacy concerns, I'll call out the current digital interactions on the web are very asymmetric from a trust perspective. We have to share a lot of data to prove who we are to reduce risk for our counterparty, but we're not afforded the same confidence in return. And so it's very vulnerable to fraud, identity theft, all kinds of harms. And so we at DIF seek to address this through standards, principles, and incubation, especially through our newly launched DIF labs to get this rolled out into the wild. Heavy focus of ours is privacy enhancing cryptography. That includes the ability to selectively disclose attributes, but then also zero knowledge proof. So this touches on what both Manu and Jay were saying. And back to Jay's comment about making it too easy to build a super cookie. I think a trend, a theme that's come up lately is that sometimes some friction is good, and we believe in building better defaults. So that's really what we're focused on, defaults that are more privacy preserving by design. Thank you.
Okay, so back to Jay. I'm going to have you reiterate some of the things that you said when you introduced yourself. I think probably very few people in this room have been paying close attention to the push by a number of state legislatures to adopt mobile driver's license technology. But if you have been reading what Jay has been writing, you might be alarmed. I want to read something that you wrote in October. Around the country, state legislatures are embracing the creation of a nightmarish electronic identification system that has the potential to track everybody online and off. Just bring us up to speed, and you have to reiterate a few things, but how did we get to this point, and sort of where is the rubber meeting the road in the most alarming way, in your perspective?
Yeah, so, I mean, the nation's DMVs, motor vehicle departments, have the power to put, a piece of plastic in all of our pockets and all of our purses, and they have the power to put it all into our phone wallets as well, and so we've seen a growing number of states that have gone down this road and have started issuing digital counterparts to their physical licenses, and they lack the kind of privacy protections that we want to see. And I think that the potential worst case scenario here is that right now, if you want to have somebody identify themselves online, you have to go through this whole rigmarole, which is actually pretty bad, we hate it too. It often involves face recognition, which is discriminatory and so forth. But that's a lot of friction. A website is not going to casually make their visitors identify themselves if they don't really need to. If you can just say, press here to send us your fully DMV vetted, cryptographically secure, inescapable digital prison driver's license, then many, many more sites and online and off are going to do that. Maybe 7-Eleven's, general counsel says we should start making everybody. You don't even have to have a human ask you for your ID anymore. It could just be a robot. Just scan here to enter 7-Eleven. And so. That's sort of the nightmare scenario that I'm really concerned about. And there's a lot of reasons to think that it would unfold because there's so many incentives for gathering information and for, knowing who people are and the like. And I could talk at some point about what we think are the fixes should be. I don't know if now's when you want me to.
Sure. Let's dig just a little bit into the ISO standard a little bit more. And I'm wondering sort of from your perspective and your view on this, why is this being pushed so hard? Who benefits and in what way from this particular technological model? And I guess what are the biggest problems with it from the ACLU's perspective? So
the banks are dying for a digital ID because they have the KYC regime and so forth, and they want this to happen yesterday. There are a lot of other relying parties that would love to be able to do this, and Google and Apple are behind it. I think for unclear reasons. Maybe they just want to make your phones more useful to you. They may want to be middlemen, and they, one of the issues here is whether we're going to end up with a duopoly where basically Apple and Google have control over this and serve as gatekeepers and can charge fees for people who ask you for your identity. That future is fuzzy, but these players probably are circling around that, and certainly, especially Apple, there's a lot of reason to think that they're keeping an eye on those kind of possibilities, and so yeah.
Kim or Manu, is there anything that either one of you want to add to this? So we're still kind of setting up the problem here.
Yeah, I like to use an analogy. So, if you think about the sort of value prop, driver's license, inconvenient, having a digital version in your wallet, easy identification in the browser. This sounds convenient, sounds great, but let's focus on how you use your driver's license now versus what a digital variant of that might be. So say you have your physical driver's license, you're dealing with law enforcement. Sure, they're gonna run it and run a check against a database, make sure you don't have any convictions, things like that. But a more common case would be that you're trying to access some age-restricted substance or content. And so it's just you and one person. So the bartender or whomever who call the verifier, that's required to check your age. They go through training and, make sure that they're not doing irresponsible things with your identity data. So the digital variant, it's not the same. It's you, the verifier, and potentially many other parties, including data brokers, who can now augment their information on you. So back to the bar analogy, I like to say it's you, the bartender, everyone in the bar leaning over to look at it, and then also all the bars gossiping amongst themselves so they can sell you ads for more beer. And who knows, maybe your insurance company can jack up your rates because you're drinking irresponsibly or something like that. So we have to be very careful about creep under the guise of convenience.
Okay, so we have this problematic technological approach embodied by the ISO standard that seems to be moving forward at least in some states. But what can be done about this? Because I know Manu you've been working on alternatives, alternative technological models, verifiable credentials, a standards making process that's more out in the open. Can you run through some sort of alternative approaches to the way things have been going, and how can we get some of these alternative approaches to get a little bit more traction?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and I wanted to underscore what both Jay and Kim are saying. These are very real dangers, and it's been known at least in the identity community for years that this is not necessarily a path that we want to go down. Meaning, full identification for transactions where you don't really need that full identification. Okay, so two things matter here. One of them is that when these standards are being created, that the general public gets a view into exactly how the sausage is being made. It is important to understand that when a standard's put together, that civil liberties organizations, security professionals, privacy professionals did actually look at the standard and make sure that it had been vetted. So like I mentioned before, at the World Wide Web Consortium, especially around the verifiable credential work, that work has been happening for many years. The vetting, the public vetting, the public development of the standard, and all that sort of thing. So that's one part that matters, is how these things are built in the first place, and did they get appropriate vetting. The second part of it is ensuring that when you build these things, that you do use advanced cryptography. So we have ways, specifically from the cryptocurrency community, that allows you to be private when you engage online, right? So we have these things called, zero knowledge proofs that allow you to, for example, just prove that you're over the age of 21, for example, and do it in a way that doesn't automatically result in you being tracked. So to give you a concrete example, that it is possible to do these things the right way, meaning developing it through like World Wide Web Consortium or a similar open standard setting body. And then two, if you look at, and I love the example of being above age to buy like alcohol, for example, that Kim used. There is a program in the United States called the True Age Program, and it is run by a group called the National Association of Convenience Stores, and that's 152,000 stores across the United States. And when they looked at, they knew they needed to go digital with the stuff. They wanted convenience, but what they also knew was that if they created a mechanism that tracked consumers as they went from store to store, that no one would trust the solution. And so, and this was 6 years ago, right? They made the conscious decision to build this in a privacy protecting way, and that system is now in production in all 50 states. So if you wanted to, you can opt into this system. There's still a right to paper. You can choose not to participate in it, but you can opt into the system. And when you opt into the system, when you go into a convenience store, you no longer have to show your driver's license, which, by the way, is a bad practice, right? I mean, you're showing 35 pieces of deeply identifying information just to buy a beer, right? You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be doing that at a bar, and you shouldn't be doing that at a convenience store. So they've put an alternative mechanism in place where, as you use these single-use tokens across the convenience store industry, those stores cannot track you. They're a one-off, you're over the age of 21, trust us, this person has been vetted sort of credential. And if we look at the right way to deploy this, if you look at the way the state of California's DMV has deployed it, they support both of these standards. They support MDL because, hey, when you're getting on an airplane, they really need to know who you are. And they support, hey, this person's just buying a beer. They don't need to fully identify themselves. So the state of California in their California DMV app supports both MDL and verifiable credentials. And when it comes to age verification, they support this mechanism called an unlinkable digital age verification. They support a true age. So all that to say that there are right ways to build this kind of solution, and they are being deployed in a responsible manner. And those are examples that perhaps the rest of the states in the United States should follow.
Curious. I have a follow up on that. I'm curious about what's going on under the hood. It sounds like in this DMV app in California, from the user's perspective, it probably may feel the same to use one or each of these credentials. What is going on under the hood, though? How is it different under the hood? And I think the larger question that I'm wondering is, for a verifiable credential, is that necessarily decentralized, and does that necessarily call on technologies that have been developed in the crypto space?
Let me take the second question first. So, is it necessarily, do verifiable credentials always work like this? And the answer to that is no, right? You have to be very careful how you design these things. It's perfectly possible to build a verifiable credential that is a tracking super cookie, and we know that's bad, right? We're trying to get away from that. And we'll get into some of the policy decisions that need to be made to ensure that that happens later. But technology is a tool. It can be used to do good things, and it can be used to do bad things. And we have to be very careful about the way we use these technologies. Now, back to your first question around what is California doing differently? If you look at an age verification, like what's actually happening. So just think about, today in a bar, if someone cards you, you go to buy a beer and someone says, hey, I need to see an ID. You reach in, get your physical ID, and you show it to them. And what they're doing is they are depending on some other organization having vetted your age. And that's the DMV, your state DMV. And they're checking to make sure that the document's authentic and it's not a fake, right? They're checking to make sure the picture on the ID is you, and that kind of gives them an idea of this is your ID. And then they look at the date of birth and they go, okay, you're over the age of 21. That's the vetting process they do. Now, the interesting thing in the California DMV case is that they've already vetted you. If you have one of these digital IDs, they've already vetted that you're over the age of 21. And so you don't need to show your entire ID. You just need to show a proof that the DMV believes that you're over the age of 21, and that meets regulatory burden in many of the states, especially in the state of California. So what they're doing is they are taking the place of the clerk in the store, right? Or the bartender. They're basically saying, look, trust us, we vetted this person. They're over the age of 21. And then they're allowing the generation of these single-use age tokens so that when you show the age token, it is a privacy-protecting proof that you're over the age of 21 that the bartender or the clerk at the store can trust. And that's an example of the type of regulation or at least legislation that the states should be looking more at. Like, don't request information that goes beyond what the transaction needs. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did, and I'm going to ask one more of you, Manu, and then I'll turn a similar question to Kim. I'm just curious, how do you see the role of crypto and blockchains, the crypto space, I guess, generally speaking, in all of this? I think actually Yaya did a nice job setting up this thought, which is that maybe there's whereas there's a lot of talk about technology and cool technologies and even mind-blowing technologies in the crypto space, how does that get translated into real-world deployments in the context of ID?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent question. So there has been, I'd say, a lot of the most advanced cryptography work is happening in the crypto space, meaning blockchain. Like that has been true for probably 15 years now. That's where these really exciting privacy-preserving technologies are being created. Now, the challenge is that in order for example, a government to use those technologies, it has to go through a national standard setting body. So things like the National Institute of Standards, and for it to go through that, it has to go through maybe the Internet Engineering Task Force, the World Wide Web Consortium. And that cycle, that development cycle, is painfully long. It's 7 to 10 years for a technology to be invented probably another 5 years for it to be accepted as a viable path forward, and then another 7 years. So we're talking 13 to 15 years to get these privacy preserving technologies such that a nation state can use it. And I think that's where a lot of legislative work frankly, and not just the US's national standard setting body, but many nations' national standard setting bodies are failing their population, is that they are not moving these privacy preserving technologies fast enough through the system. So part of the blame here is the slow movement of our cryptography standard setting bodies, not just in the US, but globally. The other problem is that the crypto space has eschewed, working with these national standard setting bodies, right? I mean, a lot of the blockchain and crypto community culture there is like move fast, break things, build, deploy. And there isn't so much of a focus on how do we make this technology, how do we fit it into a form that nation states can use it? So we are hard at work to get that work done, but we absolutely need support from both the legislation and regulatory side, as well as the crypto community, frankly, needs to show up to these things to help us move it forward.
Kim, do you have anything to add there? I think you have an interesting perspective on this from where you sit at the Decentralized Identity Foundation.
Yeah, so I think to your question about the traditional identity and crypto communities and how we're sort of relating, working together. So I would distinguish between more traditional federated identity and decentralized identity, or SSI, self-sovereign identity. And in traditional identity, there is some of so we started working more closely lately with Ethereum Foundation privacy scaling explorations. And, so we've actually been digging into this a fair bit. And so in the traditional identity community, there is a strong aversion to many things blockchain, or maybe all things blockchain. And originally, maybe due to interpretation of GDPR, but then also a rejection, not just blockchain element, sort of right to erasure kind of concerns, but rejection of key standards that we think are important for decentralized identity and SSIs. That includes decentralized identifiers, and then a preference in general for federated solutions. So sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook. And so it ends up with more of a tolerance of the status quo, where companies have much more power over your identity data. So I'll draw a contrast. SSI, there is more philosophical alignment with the crypto communities, strong preference for individual sovereignty, and blockchain can play, distributed ledger can play a huge role in enabling self-sovereign identities or identifiers through a standard we call decentralized identifiers. Preference for decentralization in both communities, and very complementary. So the advances in ZKP, including the maturity performance improvement on client-side ZKPs in particular, are helping with adoption. And I feel like, that is an enabler that will help get it on the right side, help get it on track that we need to, standards progress. And because those also help the privacy guarantees. So that is a big focus of us with our privacy scaling explorations, is what does it look like to try to harmonize decentralized identity standards with, this much more novel advances in ZKPs, including one that we're really excited about, which are, say an issuer of traditional identity documents, and they're not issuing in a way that supports ZKPs or selective disclosure. But what Ethereum Foundation has built through their non-Aadhaar open passport is the ability to basically wrap something, add this composable edition of ZKPs, so that even if the issuer didn't start with this more privacy preserving method, you can then use it in ways that support selective disclosure predicate proofs. So, slightly different trust model with those. So we're focused on building those up to see like what are valuable use cases for that. I think that we're working on that sort of alignment and helping to, do what we can to support that path to standards adoption.
One follow-up there. Do you have any recommendations for the crypto space, people that are excited about these technologies in the context of identity and privacy, for how to best engage with others that are working on identity technologies, both Kim and Manu?
Yeah, I think at Decentralized Identity Foundation, we have an applied crypto working group. And so that's where a lot of our work in this area is happening. So we have a lot of ways to engage. Check out our site, Identity Foundation, and, you can join in groups. And also we have a newsletter you can subscribe to where we talk about the work that we're doing.
Anything to add, Manu?
Definitely +1 to what Kim's saying. Diff is doing just foundational work when it comes to applied cryptography and privacy-preserving technologies. There's also the World Wide Web Consortium credentials community group, which has like 580 plus people. It's free to join, free to participate. Anyone can do it. And I really suggest that, people kind of dive in both at Diff and at the credentials community group because, a lot of the people that are kind of foundational, fundamental, key parts of the community just showed up one day and started participating, right? It's really easy, very open, transparent. We certainly need the help to move these technologies forward. And it can be a really rewarding experience, right? I mean, many people started on this work many, many years ago. And today they're being deployed at the state and nation state level. So, your ability to have an influence, even as an individual, have a global influence as a single individual is alive and well, certainly at Diff and certainly at the World Wide Web Consortium.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up with one more question, and we'll take a few questions from the audience if we have time. I'm going to zoom back out. One of the most fun things about being in crypto is hanging out in the technological weeds. But one of the things that I appreciate about Jay is that sometimes he just puts things in fairly simple terms in ways that can be pretty educational. And one of the questions that he's asked a few times in conversations that I've had with him is basically, we have all this crypto magic, and why aren't we using it? And that's kind of like, we're kind of wrestling with that in this discussion. But I want to wrap up there because I've got a question about that. But first, I just want to clarify with Jay. I want Jay to clarify what exactly he means by that. What is the crypto magic that you are referring to, and what do you see as the reason that we're not using it?
Yeah, the crypto magic, and that means cryptography, is things like zero knowledge proofs that allow you to prove that you know something without sharing what that thing is. For example, proving that you're over 21 without sharing your date of birth. And so what we're asking for is for state legislatures to pass laws saying, you are the DMV of this state shall not create a digital identity unless it has these 12 qualities that we outline. And an example, I don't think has been mentioned, for example, is not only proving you're over 21, but also proving you're over 21 repeatedly to different relying parties, to different verifiers, without using a unique token that's the same across all of those presentations, because then it becomes a tracking device. That could be very important. For example, if you're visiting a lot of websites and you're proving you're over 21 and they're all part of the Meta, advertising network or whatever, they can all collude and look at, and even if it's anonymous, if one site can identify you, then everybody knows everything. And the ISO standard sort of just didn't bother to do that, because the ISO standard was all about making sure that holders of identities couldn't break them, and they were worried about the interests of the verifiers and not worried about the interests of the holders, which were completely ignored in that standard. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why we aren't currently exploiting all of the potential for us to have our cake and eat it too, to be able to identify yourself and prove things about yourself without violating your privacy. And part of it is just like we're just walking backwards into this because nobody's sort of bothering to do it. And we hear from state legislators who've never thought about it, and they do it out of naivete. You put your credit card in your wallet, we'll put your driver's license in your wallet, and everybody will think of me, your state representative, as very pro-technology, and I've made your life easier, and so forth. And so, there are interests at work who would love to use these systems to track people. I don't think they're pulling all the strings in some big conspiratorial way, although they certainly are pushing for the rapid adoption of subpar standards that we may yet get locked into for decades, because if it's going, you can show your Virginia driver's license in Maryland. If we're going to have that kind of interoperability, which everybody views as necessary in the United States, there's going to have to be a standard, and we're sort of sleepwalking into a standard that we could be locked into for many decades. So that's the concern.
And this is not only about driver's licenses. Kim and Manu were both co-authors on a high-profile academic paper last year, making the case for what the authors called personhood credentials, or digital credentials that empower users to demonstrate that they are real people, not AI, to online services without disclosing any personal information. So looking ahead, there's a problem that goes beyond surveillance and tracking, which is just keeping track of who is human and what is real online. And the paper describes personhood credentials, and the description, I think, reflects some of this crypto magic that Jay is talking about. And so the question that I have, again, for Kim and for Manu is, why, in your view, why is there not more eagerness in society to embrace this crypto magic for identity systems? Is there something specific that needs to happen here in DC to open the door for that? And what other practical steps can we take to make sure that society adopts the best possible tools for protecting human identity? Kim?
Yeah, I can start with that. So there are some things to make the crypto magic, from a practical side, more usable. This is something that we're very aware that we need to make better. I think that, the cryptocurrency Web3 community is very familiar with the idea of how challenging it is to get someone to, get their mnemonic seed captured, things like that. So a lot of the same concerns going on when you're dealing with these. And so, there's that. I think, though, on the policy side, what's really exciting about today is we need your awareness, and we need people to be able to know that there are solutions, but then also continue to advocate for the right to paper, as Manu mentions, which very frequently gets lost in these discussions. In the context of the personhood credentials paper and the discussion here today, I think, the personhood credentials paper does a good job of outlining the case of, the urgent need for distinguishing people from bot activity. But a risk, of course, is, we don't want to go from captchas are broken to log into the web with your government ID. So, some have proposed options for personhood credentials as, we have this MDL thing, let's just go ahead and use it. And we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that, we're not building a show me your papers web. And so, but then also on the personhood credentials side, I think it's important too that people want to use AI tools. And with the standards we've been talking about, we have the opportunity to let people do that, build it on more secure rails or a foundation that enables trust and privacy by design.
Anything to add, Manu?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Plus one to what Kim said. I wanted to underscore also what Jay said about legislatures kind of sleepwalking their way into this future that we don't want. Our experience in engaging with federal and state is the same. There are some people in federal that really know what the dangers are, and they're trying very hard to avoid those dangers. But when it comes to some of the state legislatures, or even some of the people that are deploying these digital credential technologies, it takes an enormous amount of work to bring them up to speed with the dangers, the privacy dangers of what they're contemplating on deploying. So if there is something that can be done in Washington and something that can be done in the state legislatures, it's to continue to educate the lawmakers about the dangers of rushing ahead, right? So as Jay said, I don't think this is some grand, conspiracy to try and track everyone. But we will sleepwalk our way into a bad future, just like we sleptwalked our way into having cookies on the web. Cookies are the fundamental mechanism that everybody uses, that sells data and makes money off of data, uses to track us on the web. And these are kind of the in-person, reincarnation of cookies. So we have to avoid that future, because in hindsight, we know that was the bad thing to do. Nobody intended cookies to become this massive tracking thing on the web, but it did. And it has taken us a decade to try and just rip that out of the web and do it in a better way. So we've seen that happen before. We need to avoid it happening again. Unfortunately, we're not avoiding it as well as we could, because a lot of the lawmakers are not educated enough about the dangers of not using these privacy-preserving technologies. Now, the good news there is that we have the technologies. It's perfectly possible for us to avoid this future. And in fact, we've deployed these sorts of technologies, especially like, the personhood credentials thing. There's a very small gap between prove to me that you're over the age of 21 and prove to me that you're a human being, and do it in a privacy respectful way. That stuff's already deployed in production. So I think what we need is we need to get people, legislatures especially, educated so that they can push the right things from a technology perspective.
It is true that the big problem is that nobody's paying attention to this, and you can't explain it in an elevator. I am talking to a number of state legislators, in particular state legislatures that are very interested in this, and so I'm optimistic that we may see some legislation in some states. And it's always the hardest is to get the first state, because no state wants to be the first state to do something.
Let's see if we can get this screen unfrozen, then we'll take, if we have any questions, we'll take a couple questions from the audience. But thank you very much to Jay and to Kim and Manu, if you can still hear me, for joining us this morning. Okay, any questions for Jay?
Thank you. I'm Justin. I'm a former financial and crypto regulator and an investor in various technologies in the digital asset space. But my question is really about financial inclusion and inclusion more broadly. So the current kind of analog identity space excludes a lot of people from access to the financial system because they can't prove that they are who they claim to be and that they're uniquely that person. And so that's one of the arguments for digital ID, that it would be incontrovertible. But how do we make sure that people are included, in the desire to protect privacy? How do we make sure that we don't inadvertently exclude people from participating in that system? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, I mean, inclusivity is a big part of this, and so one of the key, sort of tenets of what we're advocating for, one of our 12 points in our ACLU state legislative recommendations on digital ID is a right to paper, which is that nobody should be forced to use a digital ID. You should still always have the option to use a plastic ID, and there will be some people who can access a digital ID but not a plastic ID, and vice versa. And so generally, when it comes to inclusion, more options is better. But we don't want people. If you do force everybody, whether formally or de facto, to use a digital ID, and like there's no law that says you have to have a credit card, but try fully living a life without one. We don't want to end up in either de facto or de jure world where you're required to have a digital ID, because there's a lot of people who don't have smartphones. A surprisingly large number of people who don't have smartphones, or don't have the competence to use them, or the inclination, or what have you. So I mean, that's how we think about it.
And when lawmakers are thinking about how to do digital ID in their states, like, is this something they're contemplating?
I don't think. The question is this something that lawmakers are contemplating when they do digital ID in the States? Lawmakers generally aren't really contemplating anything when they do digital ID in the States. They're just saying, we want to put our driver's licenses in our wallets. And it doesn't go beyond that. But we're working on that. So, yeah.
Okay, two more questions.
I'm not sure I have a question as much as a comment, put something out for discussion. I'm Carol Van Cleef. I wear one of my hats I wear is a member of the board of directors of the Travel Rule Information Sharing Alliance, which is set up to help vast virtual asset service providers deal with U.S. and requirements of other governments around the world on sharing information about transactions when the transaction moves from one place to another, which in the crypto world is more complicated because you do have a transaction going from one regulated VASP to another VASP. But we also have the situation where the information may move to an unregulated entity that's processing transactions, or even to a unhosted wallet. And what many in the crypto community don't realize, and they've been focused on other issues, is that this is a requirement by law, and the U.S. government and the governments in Europe in particular, because the MiCA requirements went into place a couple months ago, or almost a couple months ago now, that this information that your VASP, Coinbase or Kraken or whomever gets about you is supposed to transfer with your value transaction, and I'm saying it a little bit of using the bank analog, but bottom line is that information is going someplace else in the world, and you may or may not know who that recipient is. So again, it's a little bit of a different play here, but the need to find an answer is really quite pressing, because one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of months in particular is a flurry of emails that are coming now that are, some of them are spam, some of them are legitimate, that are going to entities saying, we've got a transaction that's coming to you. We're sending you something from Carol, and here you need to go to a website and check Carol's credentials so that we can say we've satisfied the U.S. government requirement. One of the problems is if it's a spam email, you're clicking on something and you may end up with lots of nasty viruses. On the other hand, if you're a Coinbase and you're sending that information someplace in the world that you may not have the same kind of protections around your identifying information when you get it. Now, I apologize, a little bit complicated, but bottom line is we've got an existential threat we're dealing with right now, and it's not being focused on at the same degree as some of the other issues, like the IRS broker-dealer requirements and so on. But it's in that same kind of category, and it's even worse because our identifying information that has to be collected by law here in the U.S. is potentially being sent to maybe in the U.S. and maybe outside the U.S. to people who have no infrastructure and no commitment to adhering to protecting the privacy of that information.
Anything?
That's really interesting. I think that my co-panelists would have been able to say more things
Yeah.
than me about that. But
We also might want to have a discussion about information sharing at one of these future meetings. So I appreciate your comment. I think that we're out of time now. I'm getting that signal. So I appreciate everyone coming. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jay.